I start right with the basics, the kind of circulation that magazines can have and how it differs. And obviously, my background is in paid circulation, and I encourage any magazine that anyone starting a magazine. And years ago, Colleen and I used to have a business that a lot of what we did, we specialized in launching magazines or doing business plans for magazines that wanted to launch. And we did a lot more business plans for magazines that wanted to launch than we ever launched, because many of them didn't work. They just weren't economically feasible. So paid circulation has some real advantages. It has a wonderful revenue stream. Advertisers love it. Problem with advertising that, unlike paid circulation is stable. Advertising can fluctuate. Advertisers are fickle. Paid circulation, much less so. The problem with it is you have to invest to get it. It takes a while to build it. So a lot of the magazines, we work on developing a plan for them. We'd go to the publisher, or whoever it was wanted to do it. They'd look at the numbers and they'd say, gosh, that's a lot of money to get that magazine going. Maybe we should do controlled circulation. You know, you can start, you buy a list, you send out a lot of magazines. It's inexpensive, it's fast, and you can do 100% of the market, which is the big advantage of controlled, of course, is you can just fill in all the edges. Paid circulation, 30% of the market, and that's it, you know. Not everybody reads magazines. The problem with controlled circulation is you come upon a bad stretch of the economy and down it goes and you're out of business, maybe. Or you can do mixed circulation and combine them, as some magazines do. That's our magazine, SkyNews, launched by the National Museum of Science and Technology in Ottawa, and then they sold it to us, to Terence Dickinson, the editor, and Colleen and myself. It's not a bad, it's a good example. I'll talk about it a bit because it's a good example of a niche magazine, and these days niche magazines are where you want to be if you can. You know, news magazines, anything that has to compete with the internet has problems. You know, news magazines, celebrity magazines, all kinds of stuff, general interest. But niche magazines kind of work. They always have worked and they continue to work. If you think about it, this is a magazine for amateur astronomers. So amateur astronomers are like gardeners and people like woodworking or foodies. They're all like mini experts in their field. They know a lot of it. So if you give them a quality editorial product, they appreciate it. They understand it, they appreciate it. And we have a wonderful editor. That's really all we have. We have a great editor, and that just motors us right along. People who, if they like the product, if they understand that there's quality there, they'll pay for it. And then with a niche magazine, once you've built up that group of people who will pay for it and are obviously enthusiastic, they've qualified themselves by paying, then there's a natural, what would you call it, a natural community of advertisers that will want to talk to those people. The other thing about this is, if you're going to launch a magazine, you're going to build paid circulation or any kind of circulation, I guess, for a magazine, you have to find a place where the audience is concentrated. You know, all our subscribers are in the phone book somewhere, but it wouldn't be economically feasible for us to try and find them in the phone book. But when we started to launch this magazine, there was, you know, Royal Astronomical Society of Canada had members. There were star parties all over the country all summer long. There were retail stores like Vancouver Telescope Center, I guess it's called, that are dedicated to just selling equipment to these people. There are clubs all across the country as well as just the RASC, and I could go on. So there's already other people have concentrated the audience. So now when we go to something, we go to a star party, everybody there is part of our market. And they're enthusiastic, and somebody else has gathered them, and then we can sell them the magazine, sell them a subscription. That's kind of what we do. Just before we leave this slide, this is the Jan-Feb issue that's at the printer now, and I already know what that's going to sell in the newsstands. I know I probably could tell you within 100 or so what it's going to sell. And I also can, know what the cover story was last year, and it was top 10 sky sites for 2013. And the year before that, it was, what was it? It was different. It was 12 best celestial events of 2012. And the point I'm making is that with a niche magazine, with any magazine to some extent, if you pay attention, there are things that your audience really wants. And you just have to keep giving it to them like that. They want that story every January, February. And if we just, we just don't change the cover line. There was a fishing magazine I did some work for once, and they went to the extent of actually having not the same photograph, but in June, I think it was. I don't really fish or anything, but I think it was in June. They knew that if they put this particular trout or bass or something leaping out of the water with this particular fly, they knew what they could sell in the newsstands, and they did it every year. That's there's a real lesson in that for newsstands, and we can talk more about newsstands if you want, but we'll move on for now. We also work for Walrus magazine still. We launched it, and 10 years later, we're still working for them. A couple of things about the Walrus. One, there are different models for how to make a magazine work economically. And the niche magazine, SkyNews, I don't know, 60% of our revenue comes from subscribers, and the rest comes, like 30% or something like that comes from advertising. And then there's that other 10%, which is some merchandise sales and Heritage Canada and that kind of stuff. And that's important stuff. The Walrus has a different model, and I think it's important that we look at magazines and think, all we have to do is make this work. It doesn't matter how we make it work. The Walrus's model is a third, more or less, is paid circulation revenue. A third or something like that is advertising revenue and Heritage Canada and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't get you a national magazine with the kind of editorial expenses and so on that the Walrus has. So it's published by the Walrus Foundation, and that last third, and this is the wonderful thing about the Walrus, because they've now got this working so they can sustain a magazine. Like, this is really the old Saturday Night carried on, but Saturday Night didn't have this. They did for a while, but the Webster family supported Saturday Night, and when the Webster family got tired of spending that money, it was over as a standalone magazine. So the Walrus Foundation has events across the country, has all kinds of donors, corporate donors like Enbridge, gets a little bit of criticism there, as you can imagine, but all kinds of other donors. And they contribute the last third. And as long as that model seems to be there for good. And it's important, I think, to have a magazine like that. Another thing I would say, we'll get back to the cover on that maybe a little bit later, but the Walrus can only really do 10 issues a year. It doesn't make sense for them to publish every month. But what they were able to do by watching their newsstands and so on is they developed some special issues. This happens to be a special issue as well. That's the 10th anniversary issue, which is on the newsstands now, has been since September 9th or something like that, and hopefully it will be till the end of the year. But it'll be out there with this issue. And this is the double winter issue, it used to be called the January-February issue. And that comes out in December 8th, I think it is, or something like that. And it's on the newsstands during that massive Christmas shopping period when Chapters Indigo, there are lineups, and we have an A-frame purchased, I hope, in Chapters as you walk up to people who are standing in line. And you can count on this one selling, even though it's sort of like it's not really a hole in the publishing schedule. It's like this will sell nearly twice as many copies on the newsstand. So it means it reaches twice as many people, and then you get gift subscriptions and all that. So the Walrus has the double winter issue put out for the Christmas crowd. And then it has a summer reading issue, which is another way of doing a special issue. And my point with this is that to the extent that you can make each issue special in some way, and there have been some, well, to the extent you can, there are real benefits to it. People respond to that kind of thing, even though sometimes it's a little bit forced, they still seem to respond. Another magazine we work for, and this is sort of the mixed circulation I talked about. They have a nice paid subscription base of 12,000 or something like that. And this is a magazine for the North, for the Northwest Territories, people in the it's about the Yukon, it's about Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and to some extent Alaska. And it has newsstands, and then you know, there's not a lot of people in the North. And to get all the advertisers up there interested, they had to have a more dense circulation, a greater coverage of the ground than you could ever get with paid circulation, especially in the North. So if you live in the North, you want to go in or out, you fly. You want to move around in the North, you have to fly. You want to do business in the North, you have to fly. So the third portion of their circulation is quite a large, actually, controlled circulation through airlines and airline lounges, and it works really well. And the reason it works really well is advertisers up there love they love the fact that people are picking it up as they're going into the North to do business or to travel, or going out of the North to travel. But in fact, then I thought this is really appropriate because going back to the times when Colleen and I used to spend a lot of our time doing magazine launches and planning for magazine launches, we developed some really good habits because everything had to be nailed down. Like you know, we all do shorthand. Like now when we're planning, say we're doing the annual plan for the Walrus, a lot of it just goes on in our heads and that, because we've done it before. When you're doing a launch plan for somebody and they're paying you to do it and they're thinking of investing a lot of money, you just nail things right down. Like it's on paper, it's quantified, that whole thing. So we really got in the habit of writing down a detailed description of the readers. It wasn't just chatting points. And that was really handy because, you know, I mean, you'd have your demographic, all your demographic characteristics, male, female, age, income, geographical location, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes we'd even go out and spend money to do analysis, like serious overlays of lifestyle. I can't even remember what they call them now because I haven't done it in a long time, but take lists and pull out all the lifestyle characteristics and get real detailed demographics about folks. Anyway, we never really made much progress in that until we got into the psychographic stuff, the lifestyle stuff. Like when you started, you'd have all this, you know, then you get into, well, what do they do? What are they interested in? You know, it's gardening or it's food or something like that. And then you could finally, so, you know, we did those detailed descriptions. We were mostly looking for various psychographic kinds of things so you could really target on that, because you can't target very well on demographics. And then that would always lead us to the next thing, which was, you know, creating a list of the economical means of access to your readers. And I'm assuming most people here are doing circulation for a magazine. You're doing this in your head all the time. But we got in the habit, and we really found it useful if you really write that down and brainstorm with other people at the magazine about it. Like, how do we reach these people? How do we can't go to the phone book, we got to get them, like, what do they do? If they're gardeners, where do they go? You know, like, there was a gardening magazine we worked for once, and as an example, and they could go to the Toronto Flower and Garden Show, it's called, something like that, and they could walk away with, on a weekend, and they could walk away with 500 or 600 new subscribers. You know, like that really works because they were there. Everybody there was a potential subscriber, and then you can go through quite a list of other publications that could find, you know, can really find their audience concentrated. But they, you know, we worked for a magazine at one time. I recall that we were called in by the investor who was losing her money. She had invested in a magazine that someone else was doing, and they hadn't really gone through this exercise. So the way they couldn't, they knew they had a magazine. I don't even remember what it was about, but I know it was Toronto Century, and they couldn't really figure out how to reach these people, so they had put a whole lot of money into outdoor, which is, you know, billboards, and like thousands and thousands of dollars, and nothing happened, like nothing, you know. And it's sort of like, if they had done the planning, the proper plan, they would have realized, good idea, probably there are lots of people out there, but there's no assembled market already, and billboards just, you know, people don't respond to that in a way. And so they were just trying to put out the message. It does work in a way. It worked for House and Home magazine, actually, to do that, because they were doing something else. They were building a presence for themselves, but they had lots of other ways to reach the market. But anyway, if you're doing circulation and you're not maintaining a really detailed list, and I'll look at it a little bit more in the next slide, I think, of all the economical ways, the ways that, you know, there are lists, there are clubs, there are events, there are something like that where people are really concentrated. And then, of course, like, we always had to quantify it. We had to say, okay, this many people go to these shows, this many people are on these mailing lists that are competitive magazines. Like with SkyNews, it was Astronomy Magazine, and Sky and Telescope had quite a bunch of Canadian subscribers at that time, so we knew we could get part of that list. So you go in and quantify it, and then you figure, okay, we've got 20,000 people in the universe, or whatever that number is, and you know you can probably get, over a couple of years, a third of those people to subscribe if you have good access. So then you can do all the numbers. And there are organic sources and then campaign sources. People have different names for them, but I think that's a nice way to break them down. Organic sources are kind of the things, if you got a magazine, you don't have a whole lot of money to invest, these are the sources you're going to do. A lot of people don't put renewals in there, but I thought it was useful to do that. I always like to think of renewals as a source, because it's an area where if you work on it, you can actually improve your responses and so on. It's all about editorial. If you don't have good editorial, you don't have renewals. The point I wanted to make about renewals is that they're at the heart of what a magazine is, and a paid circulation. A magazine is a continuity program, a continuity product or whatever. It's like a printer or something like that. You pay 35 bucks to buy a Hewlett-Packard printer or whatever it is, 50 bucks, and then you spend 100 bucks for cartridges every 3 months, right? That's a continuity product. It's like a book club or a record club, or there aren't even any such things anymore, but there are lots of products that have developed that way of doing business. And magazines were one, you know, magazines were one of the more successful and early on continuity products, and they developed lots of sources for developing paid circulation. But these are the ones, like if you have a magazine, you're going to put insert cards in it. Hopefully lots of insert cards, you know. We don't. I mean, we're always scrimping on the insert cards, but you should have a few in there. They work. You don't always get the orders back on the insert cards, but the insert card says, this event is about being a subscriber. So, you know, it kind of falls out, or it sits there and it says, subscribe, subscribe. And you may not fill it out and send it in, but you might go to the website, or you might think about it. But they work. Those bind-in cards work. And then if you have some subscribers, all you have to do is send them a notice and put gift offers in the magazine, and some of those subscribers will give gifts. Like, gifts are a big and profitable part of circulation. Magazines, when we worked for Canadian Geo, I think 40% of their circulation, it was a big circulation then, was gift subscriptions. I think the Walrus is 15 or 20%. And that's really profitable stuff. And when gifts aren't renewed, when the donor doesn't renew it, they become gift orphans, and then you go and promote them and sell them their own subscription. If you have a magazine, you're going to have a website. You're going to sell subscriptions on the website. You may have merchandise. You may have a store with merchandise. SkyNews sells a lot of telescopes. We don't sell many things, or not telescopes, binoculars. But there's this particularly fine and inexpensive Celestron binoculars So we sell tons of them. That's all we do. Well, that's all we sell at the store pretty much. But, so you can do that. Then there's this whole area of email databases, you know, like people are going to be, you're going to be corresponding, you're going to be in touch with people. It's all done by email. You want to have MailChimp or something, and you want to have, everything goes into an email database, and then you send things, you use it in a lot of ways. Maybe we'll talk about, I mean, you send promotions and all that. You can do your renewals that way if you have the people's email and other things. White mail, well, there used to be that joke about the publisher who said, you know, white mail is just orders that come in over the transom. No, you know, you don't know why they come in. Circulation people used to joke about the publisher saying, that's a great source, it doesn't cost anything, let's get some more of those. And that was a joke because you really couldn't, the idea was they were things that just happened. But in actual fact, if you're out there and you're doing lots of things, then white mail and telephone orders and that, they do grow. People do respond, and you don't know why they respond, but often it's because they saw your other stuff somewhere. If somebody phones in, they want a 1-year subscription, hopefully you're organized enough to sell them a 2-year subscription at a big discount. You know, like upselling is an important part of what we do. Library agents will usually find you. So all of these, you haven't spent any money yet. You probably haven't spent anything to get that. You just did the magazine, some little expenses and insert cards and that, but basically that's kind of organic sources. Then comes this group here, which it's still not spending much money, but this takes a lot more time and effort. So we're, you know, social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all that. Stacey May Fowles, the circulation director at the Walrus, has 35 or 40,000 Twitter followers. She just sends them information as it seems appropriate. There's this one up on the website, or maybe it's about a concert or that's happening at, or you know, something that's unrelated to the Walrus, or it's a Walrus event somewhere, or she tells them the new magazine is on the newsstand today, and it's, you know, it has this great cover story or something, but it's just constant. You know, you're on Facebook, you're tweeting all the time, things like this that are helping people find you. And that's become more a big part of what we do, help people find us rather than going out and really selling them stuff to the, it's a mix now. But this is a growing, obviously, a growing area, fortunately, because a lot of the other stuff is shrinking. So if it wasn't, we'd all be out of business. But strategic partnerships, too, they're harder to do. They're more sophisticated. They're tougher to do. And circulators came to that later because it was so easy to do direct mail and gift subs and that kind of stuff. And but strategic partnerships, we'll talk about them a little bit more later on. I'll do a little case study there. But just to give you an example of the power of that, the Walrus had there's an organization that I'm not going to tell you what it is because I told somebody about it yesterday. I was saying, as an example, I said the Walrus did this program with, and I named the organization, and this woman told me about how upset she was with the organization for doing that kind of what they did with the Walrus, and how she'd written to them. And so I thought, I better not tell people that, I better not just bring that up. But anyway, there was an organization, a cultural organization in Canada that has a lobby group, really it is, and it has a big database of like 100,000 and some email addresses. So the Walrus did a little piece on them at one point. So they sent a note to their database, email database, saying something along the lines of, folks, the Walrus just did this nice little piece, and you know what they've agreed to do? They're going to give you a free sample copy if you go to this URL, and you can just get it. And the Walrus, in turn, sent a note to its email database, which is somewhat smaller, saying, this organization has a wonderful program going just now, and if you want to donate to them, go here. In one morning, the Walrus got 2,000 people to go. 2,000 people went to that URL, signed up for a free magazine. And so far, all we've got is over 2,000 email addresses. And then we sent out those magazines. And then over the course of the next month or so, I think about 500, maybe a little bit more, actually bought a subscription. So, I mean, that was one morning's work, 500 subscriptions. Total cost, really nothing. Didn't cost anything. You know, they mailed their database, we mailed our database. So we had I think it was actually about 2,200 new email addresses and something like 500 subscriptions. Strategic partnerships are wonderful. It's just like, how many organizations out there like that? There aren't that many. Like probably every market has some. You think about your own market. You probably have, there are some organizations, some, you know, maybe it's retailers, or retailers have lots of email addresses. So this is all about getting emails, really. A lot of it is. Expires. People expire, they don't renew. A couple of years later, they change their mind. There are lots of reasons people don't renew. So we go back to them. We're always mailing our expired database. Telemarketing, sort of out of fashion, but it actually works. You know, for some things it works. If you're, renewing gift subscriptions, for instance, phone the donor, it's worthwhile to do that after you've already tried to renew them with a mailing. The Walrus originally had a bunch of volunteers that worked for it in the beginning. I understand you can't do volunteers in BC anymore, but volunteers used to do the phoning for renewing gift subscriptions, and it was nice. You'd have a room full of people talking to the subscribers. They don't do it anymore. It's hard to organize that. But okay, then this could be a whole seminar. These two could be a whole seminar too. So I won't linger on them unless you have questions. And I'm kind of rushing through this. I'm not sure why, but it seems we're not moving very fast through the slides. But don't forget to ask questions if you want to. Newsstands are just so important. Canadian magazines got really discouraged with newsstands because it used to be the American magazines really just overwhelmed them at one time, but that was a long time ago. There are lots of good, strong, one of the magazine like Canadian House and Home just sells like crazy on the newsstands. But what I'd say about newsstands is however you can do it, do it. There are lots of good reasons to do it. Do it through Mags Canada, do it through a distributor, an alternative distributor if you can find one anymore. But newsstands do wonderful things. They get you out there, people see you, you get subscriptions, you get some circulation numbers for advertising. But it does something a whole lot more than that. It judges your magazine. Like when you get serious about newsstands, you start to look at your magazine differently. You look at covers and how covers work. You begin to understand what people really want from your magazine. You understand that there are good stories and there are cover stories. I remember David McFarlane did a story for Saturday Night once, and it was about a day in a retirement home. This was a long time ago. And God, the lines in the cover picture were so depressing. It was a wonderful, wonderful piece, and it won awards, but it should never have been a cover. It wasn't a cover story. It was a great story. But cover stories have to be understood just like that. So, what was that one? Top 10 celestial events for 2014. Boom. But there are lots of great cover stories, especially on more sophisticated magazines than ours, that just can't be, their great stories can't be on the cover. It's just the discipline of being on the newsstands and trying to make it work is really worth doing, getting into. You never make any money on it, probably. It's really tough, very discouraging sometimes, but it should be done. And then there's digital subs, wow, tablets and mobile and all that. And that's, but the thing about that is, that's been a huge distraction in some ways for people lately. It's moving that way, but it's not moving fast. Even the companies like Hearst and that have put tremendous resources into it. 5% of their circulation base maybe after a couple of years. You know, Wired and something like that, because of the nature of the magazine, gamer magazines, they do really well with that. You know, you can do it through Mags Canada, and there's any association with Zinio. You can get on yeah, Bob.
I'll let you finish your thought now.
Oh, I'm just going to say that you can do it through you can get on Apple with Distacore, you know, on the Apple Store and that. Neither of those are very satisfactory. Nobody's making any money off those, but it gets you into play. We're looking with SkyNews for a way to a partner who will do the digital magazines in the right formats and fulfill them, and we'll do the marketing. We really haven't found a suitable partner. The Walrus's approach is to have spent a lot of time and money building their own apps and doing it. And these are the kind of campaign sources mostly where you have to actually do some investing. Freestanding inserts, you know, you see them falling out of magazines all the time. It's a nice little program for a lot of magazines. You just swap with a lot of other magazines. Responses are less than 1%, but the cost is really low. They make economic sense. It's another kind of just do it if you can kind of thing. Direct mail, you know. Direct mail is all about lists. If there are lists, you can do direct mail. The creative is much less important than the list. If there's no list, you can't do direct mail. You can spend all you want and creative won't work. Direct mail doesn't work as well as it used to because there aren't as many lists around, but it still works. And I'll look at a sample a little later on. E-blasts, I won't go into that. You know, if you can, email's a wonderful medium if you can get good lists. And a lot of swapping of email lists goes, and so there's really no cost. So even if the list isn't that good, it's still worth doing. Gift subs, if you just have an insert card in the magazine, you're not going to get that. You're not going to optimize your production. So you can mail to your list. You can only sell gift subs to people who are already subscribers. You can't sell them outside that universe. Events, agencies, we won't talk about. Search engine marketing, e-newsletters, online contests, that kind of thing. That's all about getting emails. That's all about building those email databases so you can do e-blasts, you know, search engine marketing, that's Google AdWords, Yahoo, and so on. You can make that work. Zoomer magazine, we did the conversion from Carp to Zoomer magazine, and there was a guy there who just every morning tended his Google AdWords bids and so on and production. Yeah, it's sort of like this, you know, here's a source, there's a source, neither one's very big. You have about 10 or 11 sources, you repeat them every year and you're building your circulation. E-newsletters are wonderful. It provides some information to people, you sign them up. All you're really after is maybe you can sell advertising out of it. Mostly it's about getting email addresses. Hearst has 25 million email addresses in a database which they got online on their various websites by offering people contests. We'll pay your, you know, one of them was a Good Housekeeping, we'll pay your mortgage if on the Good Housekeeping. It's a sweepstakes. You enter, if you win, we'll pay your mortgage or we'll renovate your house or something. Offers, pricing and offers are so important. If you don't know what to charge for the magazine, underprice it. If you overprice it, people don't respond. You don't know if they didn't like the magazine, they didn't like the price. So if you don't know what to charge, underprice it. Pricing is all about perception. Nobody calculates benefits so much. It's about perception. Those half prices, those $9.99s, those, you know, half the newsstand, 50% off, that really works. There's a thing, I think it was in the Atlantic recently, in an article I noticed this little anecdote. They were talking about some research that was done where people were given the opportunity to travel a distance to buy a product that they wanted that was worth $100, and they could get it for half price, $50 off, or, and I don't know how they did the research, or other people were offered the same thing, to travel the same distance to get the same $50 off a product that was worth $500. So a lot more people opted for the half price product, even though the saving was the same. It's just perception, and that's how price works. Premiums work. Trips, travel are a good premium. Special issues, anniversary issues. If you're doing an anniversary issue, or even just like an equipment issue, or whatever, include it in your offer as something unique. You get for this much money. And anyway, this is the order card from a recent direct mail for the Walrus. Like Walrus was struggling to get to 2% in direct mail, and then comes along the 10th anniversary, and here's what it says. It says, you're invited to enjoy Canada's Best Magazine. You receive the big 10th anniversary issue immediately, so we get that special issue in there. And you'll be entered to win a trip of a lifetime with Adventure Canada. So already we've got two benefits there. Of course, the trip of a lifetime is contra, so it's a sweepstakes. They don't pay $24,000 for that. They swap some ads. Save $5, pay $24.75, so it's a third benefit. Another benefit, you can pay just $1.99 an issue if you want, and get a 2-year sub. This effort really hides the bill me offer. 95% of people pay up front. Those that don't, because we've really not pushed, it's not a sample issue offer, it's like a really pure subscription offer. This will probably get 2.3% response. Talking about special issues, this is we didn't have a special issue anniversary or anything coming up on the Walrus, but somebody noticed it was, or on SkyNews, it was the 100th issue coming up, just the 100th issue. So we did this issue, and it was a redesign of the magazine. And this is when we were down to like selling 2,000 an issue. This was redesigned. There was a little astronomy calendar, not a very elaborate one, but a nice one. Inserted in a polybag with it on the newsstands. The price is usually $4.95 and went to $6.95 for this issue. That sold 6,500 copies. That was the one I was talking about, from 2000 to that. The Walrus is 10th anniversary issue. It's a 10th anniversary, win the trip of a lifetime, free ebook with purchase. And then you look at what's on the cover. We've got the overcover, so we'd have something to sell. It's got Edward Bertinsky, pretty well-known guy, photographer. Russell Peters, well-known guy, different. Harper, whoever that, Ron Graham actually is probably, probably the more attractive part of that. Fixing Parliament, Girl at 10, Afghanistan, Digital Sex, Lisa Moore, Giller Prize. There's a lot on there to buy. In 2012, the biggest astronomical event, and one of the biggest in a long time, was the transit of Venus. Venus passed the face of the sun. So we'd just done that 100th issue, and we came out with a special issue for the transit of Venus. You can't look at the transit of Venus with your eyes or in a telescope without glasses, because it'll burn your eyes out. And we offered every subscriber, and on the newsstands, polybagged, a pair of glasses so they could stare at the sun during the transit of Venus. The glasses cost 15 cents. We charged an extra $2 a copy. It went up to $6.95 again. Unfortunately, you have to polybag this stuff, and that's expensive, but it did really well. That was when we got the Canadian Cover Awards. That one sold about 5,600 copies. And on neither of those two special issues did we actually make much money, but we got tremendous feedback from both on the two issues from readers. The newsstand sales went way up, so we got a lot of new people introduced to the magazine. Got subscriptions from those issues, and on and on. And interestingly enough, I went to an event of newsstand distributors, the people who you can't talk to, who tell you to go away after those two issues. And finally, I had their attention. Like they noticed, even the people from Walmart, for God's sakes. We did this ad in Sky News once, and it was just like, and there, of course, there was an insert card with it, so they could order, but it just listed all sorts of its benefits, reasons to buy. You get a discount, you get a chance to win a telescope, and on and on. There's a more common house ad for subscriptions, and of course it has the insert card, but it features the telescope, which is donated by the manufacturer. This is the partnership a case study. I'll be about 1 minute on this, but it's really kind of important. And the key thing is this promotion netted SkyNews 400 subscriptions. There are lots of opportunities. Well, in every field there are opportunities for partnership. In ours, there's quite a few actually. This Efton Science was one of the biggest astronomy retailers in the country. They went out of business shortly after this, but it was because their building was much more valuable in their business, so they decided to retire, I think. But basically, in the store, what they did was they paid $6 per subscription to be able to say, if you buy a telescope during the pre-Christmas season, you get a free subscription to SkyNews, and they would pay $6. $6 will more or less pay for us to ship 6 magazines to people. So it wasn't really costing us anything. The store was full of posters and other displays that had SkyNews' name, and this is in an astronomy and a telescope store. It's a wonderful place for us to be all over the place. Everybody who bought that telescope was given this so they could redeem, send us an email mostly, and tell us they had won a free subscription or they had gotten a free subscription from Efton Science. And Efton Science blasted they had a big email database. They blasted that. They did a lot, and in return, we supplied the magazines. So basically, we really didn't do anything other than agree to do that, and that resulted in 400 subscriptions, which we got $6 each for. But those, Colleen does the circulation for SkyNews, and she says they converted very well, which means probably 50% of them or more stayed with us. So I don't think it's clear, 100% clear yet, but I think the model going forward that people are going to adopt is you buy a subscription to a magazine, doesn't matter the format, it's like we're $26 for SkyNews, it's $26. If you have a digital subscription, you want paper, you have a paper and you want digital, it's another $5.95. Something like that. There's a cost for it, but it's not the same cost. So you're a subscriber, so there's a benefit in that you can have another format, you know. So suddenly it's a benefit, it's a cost, but it's a benefit. I think that's the model that will prevail. But lots of people are giving the free, you know, you subscribe to the paper, you want the digital, it's free. I don't think that sounds like the newspapers 5 years ago to me, you know, like they're just throw their business away, you know. I don't think that's going to hold. It's just going to become apparent that that doesn't work. And there are a number of major publishers, and I think Hearst is pushing that really hard, you know, because they do kind of set, you know, Reader's Digest used to say, you can do this now. You can do something because we've trained the market to accept it. Very arrogant, but it was kind of true. And there are players out there now who are big enough that they start doing something, and that's what Hearst is doing. What I described is you buy in one format and you pay a lower price for the other format. I think they'll train the market to accept that. And it's fair. It's actually a pretty fair deal. Thank you very much for listening.